Thank you. Order. The honourable member for Essex.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is it the late show now, Mr. Speaker? Thank you. I previously rose in this House to bring attention to a serious issue in our country, the unfair dumping of Chinese steel and the need for Canada to have a strong, effective response. Dumping drives down the price of steel and is having a significant impact on Canada's steel industry and the thousands of workers it employs. My riding of Essex is home to a world-class steel plant, Atlas Tube, which produces top-quality Canadian products while providing good, family-sustaining jobs in our Harrow community. In fact, the steel industry employs 22,000 working-class Canadians in steel production and an additional 100,000 Canadians indirectly. Steel accounts for $2.6 billion a year in GDP. The NDP echoes the call of industry and labour groups for a modernized trade remedy system that effectively addresses issues like steel dumping. The Canadian Chamber of Commerce and local chambers like mine in Windsor-Essex have urged the federal government to act by passing resolutions in support of ending unfair steel dumping. The United Steelworkers have also been actively urging the government to act. In October, the Standing Committee on International Trade adopted my motion to study this important issue, and I'm very much looking forward to the study resuming in the new year. Action is urgently needed. Canada has fallen behind in our sanctions, making us an easy target for dumping. On the other hand, countries like Australia have strengthened their trade remedies. By not having our sanctions in line with other similar economies, Canada risks inviting even more dumping in the future. We need improved data collection, better transparency, more robust and frequent analysis of foreign subsidies, stiffer penalties, and improved legislation. Canadian steel has been the backbone of Canadian infrastructure projects for decades. Our plants have an excellent reputation for producing high-quality steel products while upholding strong labor and environmental standards. The government's planned investments in infrastructure should represent a big opportunity for Canada's steel industry, but they may not be able to capitalize if Canada continues to allow cheap imports from China to undercut our producers. Barry Zuckelman, CEO of Atlas Tube, has said, "Think of the consequences of our infrastructure, our factories, and our defense, all relying on foreign-made steel if our industry shuts its doors. Every day that Canada doesn't act, our steel industry is losing money and jobs." There is another serious issue that we have yet to address in this House. We know that the Liberal government is talking to China about a potential FTA. However, there is a foundational issue with this relationship that needs to be addressed in a timely manner. Canada currently treats China as a non-market economy, but we know China is pushing to be granted market economy status. Canada is going to have to make a decision. I can tell you that Canada's steel industry is very concerned about the implications of granting China this new status. It will make it more difficult to address trade issues like dumping. The Canadian Steel Processors Association has estimated that granting China market economy status would result in the loss of 60,000 highly skilled middle-class jobs, a permanent reduction in GDP of over $9 billion in the short term and $7.6 billion long term, and significant reductions in federal and provincial government revenues. So I'd like to ask the Parliamentary Secretary, what concrete measures will this government take to tackle the very worrisome issue of unfair steel dumping by China? And are the Liberals considering granting China market economy status?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for her question. The Canadian and world steel industries are feeling the effects of the economic slowdown in China, the price of inputs, and world problems of overproduction and overcapacity. As you know, I was born in Port Colborne, Ontario, and at the time there was Algoma and Atlas Steel in Welland, and they no longer exist in that form. Steel production is an important economic activity in Canada. In 2015, this industry had 17,000 jobs and generated revenues of $11 billion and injected $2.6 billion into the Canadian GDP. The Canadian steel industry has contributed significantly to local economies and to the supply chain in North America. The government is determined to support this industry and make it viable through a range of tools. For example, establishing a trade recourse system to deal with issues of dumping. That's an essential tool. This system enables the Canadian industry to compete on an equal footing and to attract investment in the North American context. Canada has put in place trade measures targeting 12 steel products in order to protect our own producers. The government has responded in multiple ways to the requests coming from the steel industry in order to strengthen our commercial recourse, the availability of commercial recourses. We have also consulted. Those consultations ended June 29, 2016. We are currently analyzing requests made in connection with those consultations. Also, the Standing Committee on International Trade has committed to undertaking a study of the steel industry. Internationally, Madam Speaker, the question of overcapacity was raised at the G20 summit in Hangzhou on September 4th and 5th. In connection with that event, the Prime Minister and other world leaders recognized the problem of overcapacity in the steel industry. The meeting was an important step because China, the main steel producer in the world, agreed to work toward increasing its efforts to share information and to cooperate. In light of the G20 summit and the OECD, efforts are being made to deal with the problem of overcapacity in the world. The Minister of International Trade is following that closely because she's well aware of the need to respond quickly to this problem. Preparations for the first meeting are well underway, and Canada will be there at the table. This government is actively taking steps to solve the trade issues that Canadian steel producers are confronted by. We want to create an environment where the steel industry continue to make a significant contribution to the Canadian economy.
Essex.
Madam Speaker, I'm hearing very little concrete answers in the government's response. To be aware of the issue and not act is cold comfort to the steel producers in Canada and those who work in this important sector. We will lose jobs if we do not act. It's good to hear that the government understands the issue, but without action, we're not going to be able to ensure that these jobs are going to stay safe inside of Canada. You know, supporting this industry must include the important consideration that I mentioned, and that's whether or not Canada will grant China market economy status. This decision is coming up on December 11th, Madam Speaker. It's very pressing, and it's urgent for the steel producers to understand what they will be facing if this government makes that decision to give that granting to China. So again, can the Parliamentary Secretary outline when his government will implement changes to Canada's trade remedy system, and how will this government deal with China's request to be granted market economy status?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade. Madam Speaker, I should add that the government and industry are attending meetings of the North American Steel Committee, and Mexico, the U.S. and Canada discuss mutual issues of interest to the steel industry and coordinate their response at those meetings. For example, the border officials have recently increased their coordination in applying anti-dumping measures. I'd like to reassert that this government is using all available tools to protect Canadian producers against undervalued products coming, and we're also trying to make sure that places like Sault Ste. Marie and Sarnia and so on can continue to be pillars of their community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.